We've got some big news to discuss, and it of course starts off with a move that happened last night. Tate Ratledge signing his rookie contract with the Lions, which means that I believe now all 7 rookies have signed their rookie contracts with the Lions. This was not really a surprise, I think, in any way. I think everybody expected this to happen. However, the big question was, when was it going to happen? We needed to get him ready for training camp. We needed to have him participate in training camp and have him available for preseason, because this is a huge opening that the Lions now have after Frank Ragnow retires. He may be our starting center this year, potentially our starting guard. We needed to have Tate Ratledge available, which makes this move massive. Now, a lot of the details are undisclosed right now. That's where this all started from. We had 2 players get fully guaranteed second-round contracts, and then around the NFL over the last couple of days, everybody was seemingly signing different amounts of guarantees with their new second-round deals. We know what the numbers are going to be set at. The NFL has set it that way, where depending on what draft pick you are, you make a set number of money, but we didn't know how much guaranteed, and that was kind of the holdout for everybody across the league. We're good to go there. All of the Lions draft picks are officially under contracts, which means that they are available to participate in training camp and also in preseason games. This is huge at the position specifically, but also because of the potential role here for Tate Ratledge. The other news is the Lions adding a little bit of depth at a couple of positional groups that were a little bit banged up as announced yesterday. For specifically, we start with the cornerback position, where the Lions had 2 of their depth cornerbacks that were listed on a list, such as Stanley Thomas Oliver, as well as Khalil Dorsey, who we know is banged up, and he may really miss some time from last year. Late last season, took a pretty significant injury. So the Lions needed to add some depth at that position, and they did that with another undrafted free agent signing from this year's draft, a rookie out of Vanderbilt, as Tyson Russell. And I remember watching Tyson Russell heading into the draft, so going back and just kind of peeking into some of his film, really cool, because I remember watching that heading into this year's draft. So he has now signed with the Lions. We'll talk about him here in a second, but the Lions also went out and added some of their running back depth as well. After yesterday, we talked about a Michigan Panther coming in for a workout. Well, the Lions have officially announced some depth alongside Anthony Tyus being waived and signed Jabari Small. We'll point out, don't forget to check out our Tate Ratledge video that we did, our breakdown video of Tate Ratledge. I believe he's going to be the future center for the Lions. At that time, I thought at some point he would be that, but after Frank Ragnow retired, I was like, well, heck, maybe this is going to happen right away. Maybe he's our future center right now. Definitely go check out that breakdown video. We watched every single game from this past season in college and broke it all down. Jabari Small from the Tennessee Titans. Now, he wasn't overly productive in the preseason. He averaged 3.5 yards per carry. He did have his final preseason game, I believe it was 65 yards on 10 carries. It shows how really unproductive the first 2 preseason games were. Everything was kind of happening at the line of scrimmage for him. There were multiple tackles for loss there. There was also a lot of blown assignments, clearly, on the offensive line. But yesterday, what we really focused on was the gap scheme and having the versatility and the guy that can play downhill. And I do think that Jabari Small fits into that. However, one big difference that stuck out to me was Jabari Small's quickness, his ability to work in small spaces, his ability to find creases, his ability to make the first guy miss in the backfield. While he may not be the complete thumper like we talked about yesterday, there is an ability to be effective on third downs, show some pass protection ability, but then also be a little bit seemingly more so of a separator underneath. And what I took away immediately was that good quickness that he had, the foot quickness, the early foot quickness, again, that ability to find creases, get a little bit more skinny, change directions a little bit more quickly, but still carry a lot of that toughness that you like. A pretty stout frame that the Lions like, under 6 foot, 215 pounds, that showed a lot of that toughness and balance, showed some contact balance, especially when guys would hit him up high to kind of stay on his feet, the foot quickness to recover in those spots. Lacked a little bit for me was some of the fluidity, but I definitely thought there was a little bit more twitch when he watched him, a little bit more of that shake and a little bit more of that shiftiness when he watched him early on reps. Ability to be comfortable following lead blocks, following 2 pulls from the offensive line. I thought pressing the line of scrimmage was a little bit more inconsistent. I seem to like him again a little bit more in some of the gap scheme than the zone scheme, because for me, I didn't think he would always attack the line of scrimmage fast enough. He felt a little bit choppy working up to the line of scrimmage and then working through the line of scrimmage, while also being a little bit more upright, which seemingly lacked some of the leg drive that he showcased. This player stood out a little bit more, though we just have a very small sample size of what it's going to look like in the NFL, though he was very productive at Tennessee in college, averaging over 5 yards per carry. Now, the other addition that the Lions made was Tyson Russell, has played both inside and outside for Vanderbilt. There's not a ton of production to actually grab onto in terms of making plays on the ball, but again, the schematic fit does make a ton of sense, and this was a player that I was very excited about even going into the draft. The lateral quickness, the ability to play inside and outside, the ability to squeeze routes, the effectiveness that he showcased in zone coverage. Even PFF will back that up as well, allowing 7 receptions on 13 targets in zone coverage versus 4 receptions on 6 targets in man coverage. The long speed was a very big question for him. It was some of the makeup speed, the long speed down the field. That felt a little bit more questionable. You wonder where he was going to stick in the NFL. Was that going to be inside and outside? And we'll have to see that kind of shake out. But having that flexibility is nice to have, especially with some of the injuries that we have. The physicality is very noticeable against run. The willingness to stick his nose in. He wasn't always the most consistent tackler, as he would kind of throw himself past tackles, which was a little bit of a problem. But he was very willing and amped up to step in and take on big hits. I also wanted to see a little bit more consistency in terms of getting off of blocks. That was my first impression before the draft of like that was very inconsistent of just getting off of blocks consistently. Not the toughness, but more of the technique aspect to get himself clean and be more impactful as a defender as things get outside. I tended to like, though, was his patience. And this seemed to show up in really every coverage type, press coverage, off-man coverage specifically. The patience that he would show, the ability to work over top of that early stem, to keep himself on top of those early setups by receivers, but not also be overly aggressive to get himself declared very early. He was very patient in those spots. That way he could stick with guys. And his footwork was incredibly noticeable as a press man corner. He was super patient with the footwork in the sense there wasn't a lot of false movement, speed release, or single step releases off the line of scrimmage. He seemed to do a really nice job of limiting his footwork to stay in positions to react much better off the line of scrimmage. He's also very long for his height. 32-inch arms is really nice length, especially from a guy that can be a press corner, be disruptive at the catch point, which I would say was probably his biggest attribute. He also wasn't very grabby either. He was very noticeably comfortable when he got into trail positions. His ability to track and trace guys when he got into trail spots, but also play very comfortable in those spots, even purposely, the way that he could really bend and lean at the top of the routes, right? The level 1, but really the level 2 routes, the inbreakers, the outbreakers, lean, settle himself down, really stay tied at the hip without having to grab, and you got to see a lot of that fluidity that was noticeable there. Again, the long speed was a little bit questionable, but his transitions were very leveraged. You could put him in underneath zone coverage, and he could plant and drive and get downhill because of some of the leveraged stance that he would play with, the way that he would settle himself down, play with a little bit more bend and forward leverage to his game so he could plant and drive a lot quicker. Some of the knocks that I had with him was some of the hip transition, just the true burst that he would showcase in his transitions as well. To me, he felt a little bit delayed at times in those spots. Some of that burst to actually make plays on the football and be more effective at the catch points. He's playing a little bit more top down, especially if he's not overly aggressive to go early, because like we saw on one of the big touchdowns that he gave up this past year to Missouri, is that he got very aggressive, decided to dive early, and he ended up giving an out and up move over the top because of the aggression that he had to play with to try to go make a play on the ball at that spot, which is why that you would think as press cornerback, he could be very effective because he can play inside and outside. He's patient. He could stick with guys early, and then he has some of that tracing ability where if he does fall behind, he could play into his support and stay stuck with players as the play rolls along. To me, he wasn't overly explosive, but he did show a recovery ability because of some of the short area movement skills. Looseness to me as a zone coverage corner. He didn't feel very tight. He could redirect pretty well. Again, you could play him inside and outside because of that, because he had some of the short area movement skills that made him play a lot faster. I get some Ennis Rakestraw vibes when I see that, right? For a guy that's not that fast to be able to stick in the SEC, you have to be you can't have a lot of false movement, and I didn't see a lot of that. I felt very reactive, got out early, and trusted himself, trusted his movement skills, which put him in a lot of good positions. It'd get him in some bad spots, but he would trust himself very early in spots to get rolling. So for me, Tyson Russell is someone I'm actually pretty pumped up to see. 5'10", 184 pounds, so he did look a little bit more bulked up throughout the season. We'll see where he comes out with the Lions, but also a guy that is very willing to step in and hit. This is a player that I'm excited about. I'm pretty pumped that we actually brought him in. I didn't know that he was actually just available, so this is a very exciting addition. It's, again, has a potential to be our best secondary that we've had in the Brad Holmes era, and I definitely think that this is a very positive addition. So with those two moves, as well as now having our draft picks locked up for training camp, there's a lot of excitement with the young guys that we're going to have competing. I'm going to leave it right there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.